Hi, thank you for watching Digging to China. I'm Dong Shang. If you have not done so already, please subscribe to my channel. Thank you very much. In today's analysis, we will delve into the reasons behind the Chinese government's inability to uphold the Chinese yuan's exchange rate against US dollar and the concessions it has made in this regard. Through careful examination of numerical data, the situation becomes evident. Whenever uncertainties arise, conducting calculations not only facilitates comprehension but also unveils the underlying truth. Examining the foreign reserve data over the last decade with a specific emphasis on this 10-year span reveals a worrisome scenario. Expanding our analysis to earlier periods might amplify the sense of concern. Nevertheless, for the present, let's center our attention on the past 10 years. When expressed in terms of the US dollar, in 2013, China held foreign exchange reserves worth $3.8 trillion. However, by last year in 2022, these reserves had dwindled to $3.1 trillion. This marked a $700 billion decrease in foreign exchange reserves compared to a decade ago. Furthermore, the composition of these reserves in US dollars was notably lower last year compared to 2013. In 2013, the reserves were primarily denominated in US dollars. Therefore, both the overall value along with the quality of composition experienced a decline of $700 billion. In 2013, China's holdings of U.S. Treasury bonds amounted to a total of $1.32 trillion. However, by the preceding year, their holdings had decreased to $1.2 trillion. This signifies that the quantity of U.S. Treasury bonds held last year was notably $120 billion lower than that in 2013. When summing up these figures, the overall decline in foreign exchange reserves denominated in US dollars over a decade from last year to 2013 reached a significant $820 billion. Moreover, there was also a decline in the proportion of dollars within these reserves. I'll simplify it further. Let's imagine it's $800 billion less than it was 10 years ago. Also, please note that the US dollars come from trade, mainly from trade surpluses, and of course, there's also some minor contribution from investment. Let's look up China's trade surplus over the past decade. In 2013, China's trade surplus was $260 billion. In 2014, China's trade surplus was $392 billion. In 2015, trade surplus was $383 billion, and 2016 is $567 billion. 2017, $478 billion. 2018 is $388 billion. In 2019, China's trade surplus was $487 billion. In 2020, China's trade surplus was $677 billion. In 2021, $676 billion. In 2022, China's trade surplus was $878 billion. To put it differently, spanning from 2013 to 2022, China's cumulative trade surplus stands at a staggering $5,186 billion. By adding this substantial increment of over $5 trillion in trade surplus to the decline in foreign exchange reserves and the reduction in U.S. Treasury bonds between the most recent year and 2013, the overall sum reached $820 billion, resulting in a combined total of $6 trillion at one point. China possesses $6 trillion. It's worth noting that this assessment solely encompasses the past decade. If we were to extend this analysis further back, figures surpassing $6 trillion, such as $7 trillion or $8 trillion, could potentially emerge. Nevertheless, within the last 10 years, China's foreign exchange reserves have dwindled from over $3 trillion, and its holdings of U.S. Treasury bonds have also decreased from exceeding $1 trillion. Examining these figures over the span of a decade, the situation becomes markedly disconcerting. Based on current U.S. government statistics, approximately $3 trillion of this $6 trillion is reportedly held in private accounts by various levels of Chinese Communist Party officials in the U.S., suggesting embezzlement. Estimates indicate that China's overseas investment have suffered losses between $800 billion and $1 trillion. In essence, over these years, roughly $2 trillion appeared to have disappeared without a trace. So, where did this $2 trillion end up? It was utilized for selling overseas and purchasing the equivalent amount of Chinese yuan to ensure the stability of the yuan's exchange rate. It's important to note that this occurred before the yuan's internationalization, and the daily transactions of approximately 600 billion worth of yuan were occurring in overseas markets. Over the last 10 years, the CCP has been actively involved in buying and selling, expending a total of $2 trillion to acquire the yuan that had left the country. However, this occurred prior to the initiation of yuan internationalization. Through these tactics, they were able to uphold the visible exchange rate of 6.3 yuan to the dollar. What is causing the current instability in the exchange rate? The explanation is rather straightforward. Where are the foreign reserves? While China's trade remains in surplus, the percentage of US dollars within this surplus is dwindling. To put it differently, the proportion of US dollars in China's foreign exchange reserves is diminishing within the trade surplus, and the holding of US Treasury debts are also on a decline. Consequently, the Chinese government's capacity to maintain a stable yuan value against the predetermined US dollar in the global market is progressively weakening. At the same time, the CCP has embarked on the mission of promoting the internationalization of the yuan. Why this push for yuan internationalization at this juncture? In my estimation, it's because the availability of US dollars is shrinking, making it increasingly difficult to uphold the predetermined yuan to dollar exchange rate. However, they appear to have disregarded the fact that by advancing yuan internationalization and reducing reliance on the US dollar, the more the yuan flows out, the more challenging it becomes to maintain the relevant yuan exchange rates. Various institutions are deliberating over the yuan exchange rate matter, pondering whether it might surpass 7. In reality, I can assure you that even without taking any measures, the yuan exchange rate will likely surpass 8. This outcome is dictated by the figures. The amount of US dollars held by the Chinese government will dictate the extent to which it can sustain the value of the yuan. Nonetheless, as China's US dollar reserves continue to dwindle, especially with yuan settlements dominating trade in Southeast Asia, Africa, and Latin America instead of US dollars, the means available for upholding the US dollar price becomes inadequate. With insufficient US dollar reserves, the idea of maintaining the yuan exchange rate becomes an implausible narrative. Why do I assert that maintaining the yuan exchange rate becomes increasingly untenable even as we progress into the 10, 11, and the 12? The reason lies in the continuous printing of yuan by the CCP and its global distribution. Some contend that China has indeed engaged in substantial dollar-based investments and contributions abroad in recent years. A closer examination reveals that when combining all overseas investment and contributions, whether at a national or regional level, within the framework of foreign exchange, the total hovers around $800 billion to $1 trillion. This serves as a limit. Furthermore, a significant portion of these investments and contributions do not involve dollars. Rather, they are carried out through the allocation of resources, equivalent assets, encompassing labor and service-oriented resources. My calculations have been limited to the past decade, and if we delve further into the past, amounts like $7 trillion or $8 trillion could also emerge. According to customs data, considering the substantial accumulations from settlements and trade surpluses, the question arises, where have these trillions of dollars vanished? They remain absent from the financial records disclosed by the Chinese government, and they haven't been linked to any pertinent purchasing activities. The whereabouts of this money remains elusive. Some might speculate, perhaps creatively, that these $5 or $6 trillion have been siphoned off by the Communist Party. If such an occurrence were true, if indeed $5 or $6 trillion were embezzled, the country's future prospect would be dire, leaving no viable rationale or underpinning for its ongoing existence. What does it mean to have $5 or $6 trillion? With the current exchange rate of $1 to 7 renminbi, that translates to a staggering 43 trillion renminbi. China's annual GDP stands at just over 100 trillion yuan, and it appears that almost half of this amount may have been misappropriated. How can the country sustain itself under such circumstances? It would be on the brink of collapse. I'm not trying to portray the CCP in the worst possible light. Let's assume they have embezzled only $3 trillion as per the officially reported figures. Even considering this amount, CCP officials at the various levels have converted these funds into their personal overseas assets, leaving the remaining foreign exchange reserves to stabilize the yuan's exchange rate. Consequently, the yuan to dollar exchange rate surpassing 8 is a rational and unavoidable outcome. Thank you for watching. Please leave a comment and subscribe to my channel. Just click the subscribe button right here. I'll see you again shortly. Until then, be well.